Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Welcome to this next installment here in the B series. In this episode, I'm going to break down all the steps that it took to spray this body with the StewMac Nitro Age Clear. So stay tuned as I'm giving you a little sneak peek here. We're going to jump right in. For the clear lacquer, we're going to be using the traditional age gloss from StewMac. This is product 4820 from their color tone series. This is the rather large can consisting of 32 ounces of clear coat, which is more than enough to do this one guitar body. For my paint gun, I'm going to be using this inexpensive kit from Aero Pro, this HVLP gun set. It's actually from TCP Global, part G7000. It's like a 3-gun kit. Got it off of Amazon about 5 years ago. Quality is actually really good for these type of small projects. It's got a 1mm small finishing gun. It's got a 1.4mm kind of a medium size, sort of a general purpose gun, and then a third gun with a 1.8mm tip for larger media such as flake and so forth. So it's got the 3 guns and it's got some other accessories as well. Now, if you don't have any interest in using an HVLP gun for something like this, or if you don't have access to a paint booth or a compressor, there are some spray can alternatives which we'll look at. Now, if you plan on doing an aerosol version of that Nitro, I first recommend that you go over to the StewMac YouTube channel and find this aerosol guitar finishing series. It's a 3-part series that kind of walks you through step by step on how to get a good finish with their aerosol version. Before we look at that, though, I want to point out, though, there's a big difference between the traditional age gloss, which I purchased and used on this bee, and their rattle can version. So they've got a traditional age gloss, they've got it in satin as well. Then they have a modern clear gloss and in satin as well. So if you scroll down to the description, you'll notice that on the traditional aged version, there is a very slight amber cast, and over time it will develop a traditional warm vintage look on your instrument. So it's already sort of pre-aged. Now the difference between that and the modern clear is that the modern clear has an ultra clear finish that won't alter or dim the color of the instrument. So we got 2 different types here in these large canisters. Now if you look at the aerosol version, they're only selling a clear gloss and a clear satin. And down here in the description, it appears that this does not have any type of amber tone already added. So in my opinion, this is probably just going to be like the modern version over here in the canisters put into the aerosol version. So keep in mind there's a slight difference there, but just wanted to point that out so you're aware, because one of the reasons I chose this traditional age gloss was to add that extra little bit of amber to the yellow on the bee to try to create that aged look, if you will. And here's just a real quick illustration of how that traditional age gloss looks through a clear cup. You can already see that slight amount of amber that was added to it to give it that vintage look right off the bat. So it's also worth pointing out that according to the instructions, you do not need to thin this. So I'm pouring it straight out of the can into the gun. All right, now that the gun is loaded, we're ready to get started. But first and foremost, we're going to use a proper tack cloth here and remove any dirt and debris that may be on the surface. Okay, so while we're getting started here, I just wanted to mention that throughout this Nitro Bee project, I had captured almost 3 hours worth of video footage, not only here in the booth, but also doing the wet sanding and polishing steps. So I'm going to be cutting quite a bit of this down just to make this as concise as possible. A lot of the steps actually repeat from the SprayMax video series, and if you've already seen that, then some of this may be redundant. So definitely going to do a lot of trimming and editing on this to make it short as possible. All right, so this is the very first coat, obviously, and you want to do a very light kind of a mist coat just to start promoting some adhesion between that Duplicolor Perfect Match base coat color to the Nitro itself. After letting that first coat dry for about an hour to about 90 minutes, we're going to start with coat number 2. For this coat, I'm starting to spray a little bit heavier, and I have the gun just a little bit closer to the body for a slightly thicker coverage. So another hour and a half after the second coat, and we've begun with coat number 3. And you can see here now that we're on the third coat, I'm starting to slow down my hand just a little bit and allow more paint coverage onto the body as I spray. So here's a day 1 recap. We've got 3 coats sprayed, all of them about 90 minutes apart. I'm going to let this sit overnight and come back tomorrow and then spray coats 4, 5, and 6. So as I begin day 2 here, I'm going to go ahead and give the body another quick wipe down here with that tack cloth. It's been sitting overnight in the paint booth and just want to make sure there's no dust or anything that's kind of settled onto the body overnight. All right, I'm going to go ahead and time lapse these next 3 coats because this is just a repeat of the same process from yesterday. We're going to do coats 4, 5, and 6, all 90 minutes apart. All 3 coats are going to be a nice medium wet, even coat. And here's how it looks at the end of day 2. We've got a total of 6 coats on now. We're getting nice even coverage overall, so I'm real happy with how this StewMac Age Lacquer is spraying. I haven't run into any issues so far. Here in this clip, we're at about 1 hour dry time after the 6th coat, so it's starting to shrink back just slightly. So we're going to take this back to the workbench. We're going to let it cure for about a week. Then we're going to start performing some level sanding here. As you can see, we're starting to get nice coverage down on the yellow on the lower areas, and we're going to do a dry sand before coming back and hitting it again. So we're going to start to equalize the low spots here in the stripes and making this nice and level before we come back with the next few coats. So I let the body sit for a whole week after those 6 coats, and now I'm going to perform just an overall dry sand with 800 grit here. That's going to knock down any high spots, any nibs, any of the orange peel that has occurred there. So just a real simple process. Just put some 800 grit around a kind of a rigid foam block there, just kind of going in one direction, just trying to knock down those high spots. Obviously, it looks like I'm going a little slow here. I'm a little timid, just want to see how this 800 grit is going to behave with that nitro. And the sandpaper is going to fill up from that, so you want to have like a can of compressed air, or if you have an air compressor nearby, you can blow most of that out of the paper after it's starting to load up just a little bit, but obviously you can only go so far with a sheet. So if you're watching this and by now starting to think that this is a tedious process, it really kind of is in a way. I'm taking exceptional caution here just to make sure I'm not going to burn through anything. After all, I mean, this is the first time I've worked with this type of nitro lacquer, so I just wanted to make sure not to ruin the project. When I started noticing some of the orange peel that I was experiencing after these first 6 coats, I posted some progress photos in a paint group on Facebook, and a real nice gentleman by the name of Keith responded. He actually reached out. He's an employee at StewMac, so he has a lot of experience with this. And I'm just following the advice here that he had given me, which was, again, to take 800 grit and just swipe in one direction, basically move in one direction across the body and knock down these high spots. That's all we're trying to do, because the next few coats are going to reburn themselves into this layer here. So we're just trying to reduce that orange peel moving forward. So overall, this is what it looks like. Again, we're not trying to completely level sand this body at this point. We're just trying to get it ready for the next stage. So to prep it at this stage, I'm going to wipe it down now with some naphtha in a clean terry rag. Now that it has that initial 6 coats of nitro, the naphtha is just going to help to clean any sort of debris and oils from my hand from sanding process off the body. So I'm going to wipe that thoroughly down. Again, this is naphtha in a rag, clean rag, and then once it's done, I'm going to go ahead and do the tack cloth as we have previously done, just to make sure there's no lint left behind from that white terry cloth. All right, so starting here with coat number 7, I've decided to go ahead and thin down this lacquer just to kind of prevent more of that orange peel from happening, and also to help, improve flow, help it lay a little smoother as we spray. So taking some advice again from Keith there from StewMac, he said, hey, why don't you go ahead and reduce your lacquer mixture down to 2-to-1. So that's 2 parts lacquer, 1 part reducer. So that's what I'm going to be using here from this point forward, is a 2-to-1 reduced lacquer. Right, and also at this stage, I'm starting to vary the direction of the spray pattern. So instead of continually going left and right, up and down across the guitar body, I'm starting to go side to side as well, just to kind of help prevent, any hot spots there where your coats start to overlap. And after waiting the typical hour and a half from the last coat, moving on here to coat number 8, same process. All right, so I've let coat 7 and 8 dry overnight. So I gave it 24 hours. Back in the booth the next day, and we're going to go ahead and prep here with another wipe down with a tack cloth, just because it's been sitting overnight in the booth. We're going to go ahead and prep for the next 2 coats, 9 and 10. And there's nothing different here about these next 2 coats, so I'm going to go ahead and time lapse these. All right, so after spraying the 10th coat, I've let this sit now for an additional 5 days, just to give it some time to shrink back a little bit here. And what I'm going to do is begin the process of wet sanding now with 1000 grit, with the goal of trying to get this leveled out now. I know the paper looks like it says 100, but trust me, if this was 100 grit, it would be like scraping gravel across. So again, I got my cheap kind of shipping foam block that I've used for such a long time here, and I'm just going to wet sand this body overall with 1000 grit. Now, at first, you can see I'm kind of approaching it again with a little bit of shyness here, a little bit of timidness, because I don't want to burn through. At the same time, I'm also trying to understand and feel what that nitro clear is doing underneath this 1000 grit. And over time, I do kind of get a better sense of how resilient this is to sanding. So But I do want to point out there's a technique thing here coming up, and I want you to listen to this bit right here. All right, let me play that clip one more time, a little bit slower and louder. All right, did you hear that kind of a squeak sound? All right, so what that is the sound of debris trapped underneath your sandpaper. It either picked up like a dust nib or something off the surface of the clear coat, or maybe just some type of impurity, either from the water maybe, or from the sandpaper itself if it got laid down on a dirty surface. But regardless of the fact, that's the sound that you're going to hear if the sandpaper picks up a small piece of debris on the surface, and you want to stop immediately, wipe off the body to make sure you've got it cleaned off again, and then dip your paper back in your water there just to try to clear any of the contaminants off. If you don't pay attention to that small little detail, and if you leave something like that, some kind of contaminant on your sandpaper, in between your body and your sandpaper, and you continue sanding, you're going to run the risk of scratching that clear coat, which is going to make it really hard to polish out later. So it's definitely sort of a feel slash hearing type thing. You want to be listening for sounds like that. You want to be feeling and making sure that everything feels normal between the sandpaper and the body. As soon as you feel some type of abnormality, you want to stop, wipe, check your work, clean off your sandpaper, wipe the body down, check it again, and then proceed slowly and make sure you're not going to introduce any unnecessary scratches to your paintwork here. All right, so now that I'm kind of getting into a better flow here, I'm starting to apply a little more pressure as I see what this Nitro Clear can handle in terms of sanding pressure and force. So I'm going to go ahead and continue to block sand this entire body down. We're going to get it mostly leveled out. I'm going to go ahead and edit this down for time because it's the same process all the way through top, back, and all sides and inside the horn. All right, so here's a final look after that 1000 grit wet sanding session. Took about 30 to 40 minutes overall to do the front, back, and the sides in between the horns there. So yeah, it is pretty tedious work here. You can see that there's hardly any shiny spots left. All that indicates is that there's a little bit of a low spot. I didn't get it perfectly flat, but that's okay because I'm getting ready to spray coats 11 and 12. And again, when you're working with nitro, any coat that you spray on top of this is going to just burn or melt into the previous coat. That's sort of a general rule of thumb with nitro. So we got it all prepped. We're going back into booth here now for coats 11 and 12, reduced 2 to 1. I thought this was a really important shot to leave in here. You can really see the difference here on coat number 11. After doing that 1000 grit wet sand prior to this, you can see how much more level and even this coat is. It's already very reflective and very smooth. So I'm going to go ahead and set up for coat number 12, the last coat. Yay. All right, so it's been a full month since spraying coat number 12, and this is something you simply cannot skimp out on. The nitro needs that time to fully cure and shrink back before you start your final sanding. So after letting the body sit for a month, it's time to move forward now with the wet sanding and polishing steps. Now everything I'm going to show you from this point forward matches the process that I use for the SprayMax version of this body. The only difference is I went back to 1000 grit and started from there, but hindsight being 2020, I probably could have gotten away with starting at 1500 grit instead. So I'm going to go ahead and leave this portion in here just to show that the 1000 grit didn't really hurt anything. In fact, if anything, it probably sped up the process just a little bit. But you can certainly start with 1500 if your surface is smooth enough. I just chose to go this route just to speed things up just a little bit. Now, just like any other instance where we've been wet sanding in this series, I'm listening, I'm feeling for any type of contaminants that maybe have loaded up onto the paper. And as soon as I notice something like that, I'm going to go ahead and dip the sanding block into the water, maybe to clean off the sandpaper, wipe the surface clean, and start over. Definitely want to work in small areas too. Wipe frequently just to kind of check your work. Again, making sure you're not burning through any of the edges or just any of the areas in general. All right, for now I'm going to let this play out at normal speed. I'm going to cut some of this out just for time's sake, but I'm going to let this play at normal speed just so you can kind of get a sense for the rate in which I'm working, sanding here in small areas, checking work frequently, and then in a subsequent grits, I'm going to definitely time-lapse those because it's all just repeating the same process. All right, so here's what it looks like after that first round of 1000 grit. Took about 30 minutes of sanding to get it nice and leveled at this stage. Now moving on to the 1500 grit, same process as before, so I'm going to go ahead and do a time lapse from this point forward. And here's how it looks after all of the wet sanding steps have been completed. At this point, you can already start to notice a little bit of reflection appearing here on the surface. So that's a sign that you've got it really close. As soon as you start to polish this out now with like some type of a buffing tool, that finish is going to pop. So I used that Hex Logic pad system in the previous SprayMax series, and I'm going to use it here too. The only difference is I'm going to go back to a yellow pad, which is a slightly more coarse pad than before, and of course using the Porter Cable 7424 XP auto polisher here. That's a random orbit polisher here. If we can get it in focus, that would be great. There we go. 7424 XP, variable speed, which is important, and random orbit is also a very important feature when you're picking out some type of a polishing system. And now we're going to load this yellow pad up with Meguiar's Scratch X here for the first round. All right, this is just a polishing pad conditioner just to kind of help get things moving here at first. And I'm going to start on a very low speed just to kind of evenly spread the Scratch X. And I've greatly reduced the volume in these video segments here, otherwise it would probably blow out your eardrums for anyone using earbuds or has the volume turned up. So I've got the volume turned way down here on these next segments. Polisher is pretty loud, but yeah, we're going to start slow here and get everything spread out, get the compound nice and even through the pad, and then we're going to start ramping the speed up considerably. All right, just stopping here after a few minutes to check work. I still see a lot of deep scratches. Again, I think that was from starting with the 1000 grit. Had I known, I probably would have just started with 1500. But yeah, at 1000 grit, you're definitely going to leave behind some deeper scratches if you don't get them out in the subsequent steps. So I'm going to hit this a little bit harder. Going to ratchet up the speed on the Porter cable polisher, and we'll get these out. All right, now I'm starting to hit the results that I was looking for. That's the cool thing about nitro is when you start introducing a little bit of heat between the polishing pad and your compound, you can actually remove scratches quite easily, but you got to build up a little bit of heat. So I started using a little more downward force to engage that pad a little bit heavier on the top of this. All right, you can see better from this angle in the lighting. There's those deeper scratches I'm talking about here. That's what I'm trying to work out at this point. So we're going to continue going over this with the Scratch X and the yellow pad. Again, applying more pressure and building up a little bit more heat to remove those. So if you don't get them out on the first pass, you just need to continue working on them longer. And that's exactly what we're looking for. All those deep scratches are now gone. The polishing compound did its job with that yellow pad. So now all that's left to do, flip it over and repeat the process on the back. All right, to get these tricky areas here in between the horns, I've got this little drill bit attachment from StewMac. This can be a little tricky, so you got to be really careful if you're going to do something like this, because this is not a random orbit type of a tool. You can burn through really easy, so you have to control the speed, go slow, check your work often. It's about the best thing I've found to do this, so if anybody has any better ideas, please let me know. All right, so now we're going to transition into more of the polishing phase. So I've got an orange Hexlogic buffing pad, which is slightly finer grit than the yellow pad. So we're going to load up the Porter cable here with the orange pad, and instead of using the Scratch X, now we're also going to go to a finer compound here, which is the Ultimate compound. Wow, so here it is. Just a few hours worth of work, and the shine and reflection on this nitro paint is absolutely stunning. So it definitely pays to really put some elbow grease into this. Take your time going through the grits, take your time going through the different pads and compounds, and you can get a very high quality result like this. I'm super happy with how this turned out. All right, so if you remember back to the beginning of this entire B series, I mentioned I wanted to spray one with the SprayMax 2K urethane and one with the StewMac aged lacquer, and I wanted to compare the difference between the two. So here they are side by side. The top one here is the StewMac, this bottom one is the SprayMax 2K, and I've got this sitting here in a room with some natural light coming in just to see if I can detect any difference, because I was thinking that the aged nitro lacquer would kind of help bring out some different amber tones from that yellow that we saw in Eddie's original B photo. So that was kind of the goal for comparing these two. As they sit here right on top of each other, the difference right now seems pretty slight. I can see that the yellow in the top body is maybe just slightly more amber, maybe just slightly like a tinge darker than the SprayMax, which has the ultra clear finish. But let me know what you guys think. I mean, that was a big process really for both of these. Both have their pros and cons in terms of, ease of use, finishing capabilities, that type of thing. But I'm curious what your thoughts are. Do you see any difference in the top StewMac body versus the bottom, which is the SprayMax? All right, now let's compare some areas on the back. Again, the top is the StewMac aged lacquer, and the bottom is the SprayMax. Again, very, very close. I mean, the shine and the reflection on both of them are almost identical, so for me, that's kind of a wash. Color-wise, again, I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are. Do you see any difference in the added amber in that nitro? I think it really looks exceptionally well. It's going to be interesting to see how this ages over time, as it's promised to in the description on the StewMac site. Well guys, I can't think of a better way to wrap up this bee painting series than to show you how the nitro bee turned out after it was completely assembled. I will be uploading a much shorter video of the assembly process in the next several days, if that's something you're interested in checking out. Well, I can't thank you all enough for sticking with me through this entire project. If you've been watching since the beginning of this series, you know it's been a very labor-intensive process, both with the nitro and with the SprayMax. But it's also been a very rewarding process, and I learned a lot along the way. Hopefully these videos have been educational and somewhat entertaining to you as well. So if you're thinking about starting your own project, I'm going to leave some links in the description for most of the products used throughout this bee series. But what I enjoy most about creating these tutorials is hearing from people afterwards that have become inspired to create their own Van Halen related guitar as a result. That's how we keep Eddie's spirit alive and well. So until next time, thank you for spending so much of your valuable time with me and supporting my channel. It really means a lot. So stay tuned for more EVH and Superstrat related content. Thanks for watching. Cheers.